Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's so good to be back on the radio on the LuvBay Afrobeat Relationship and Marriage Hour. And the topic for this afternoon is saving the marriage despite war in the camp. And that topic, is a topic that many may wonder, how can you save a marriage and there's war in the camp? But despite war in the camp, a marriage, I believe, can be saved, but it will not be an easy thing because some marriages do not merely experience conflict. Those marriages enter a state of war, and that's how bad it can be. They enter a state of war, and communication becomes weaponized. Trust is fractured. Love feels buried under resentment, silence, or survival mode. In these moments, saving the marriage is often no longer a priority because persons then are trying to save themselves, to protect themselves. However, when war breaks emotional, when war breaks out in the camp, let's think about it. When war breaks out in the camp, doing nothing is actually a decision. And it is often or can often lead to emotional divorce long before legal separation comes into play. So, if the marriage is to be saved, if you want to save that marriage, ordinary solution will not work. In other words, you go through simple things and you try to fix it. If it's just ordinary solution, it cannot work. It has to be more. This kind of crisis, whereby you're having war in the camp, this type of crisis requires drastic, intentional, and sometimes uncomfortable measures or intervention. First of all, we have to understand war in the camp means war in the marriage is marked by chronic hostility or contempt or emotional withdrawal or stonewalling, repeated cycles. So you're seeing betrayal constantly. You see maybe one of the partners come out of one betrayal, comes out of one affair, right back into the other affair. So it's a constant betrayal, neglect, or power struggle, loss of safety, emotionally or spiritually or psychologically. And this is not about a bad season, it's about a systemic breakdown. That means there is a breakdown, a serious breakdown in the relationship. And according to the word of God, it tells us that every kingdom that is divided against itself, so you in a marriage, he's going one way, you're going one way. Every kingdom that is divided against itself will be brought to desolation. It will crumble, it will fall, it will fall. So the root causes of war don't just start overnight. You know that. You see it happening in little bits or periodically, and then it just continues to grow. It is usually fueled by unresolved root issues, not usually the visible arguments. It's unhealed personal trauma. You've gone through something, and rather than that trauma being dealt with and healed, you move right into another um, affair or matter. And you feel that by not paying attention to that trauma that happened before, it will go away. We always think that way. It doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. You have to intentionally deal with it. So many spouses are fighting old wounds, believe it or not. And not merely with their partner at times. You have it from their childhood, abandonment, things that they would have gone through in their childhood years, childhood abandonment, previous betrayal from another relationship, unresolved grief, someone close died, and or an insecure attachment styles, marriages. This exposes trauma. Having gone through an affair, a betrayal from another relationship, and you come into a new relationship, and unless you deal with that trauma from the past, it creates another cycle in your new relationship if there is no healing, right? So trauma narrows the emotional capacity. So the partner react instead of responding. You know, we always say instead of reacting to a situation, reacting, we should respond. We react when we see a situation and we just blow our steam, we react then. But if we think about it and then respond to it, you get a better result, right? When a spouse no longer feels he's heard or she's heard or respected, valued, or protected, then what happens? The nervous system shifts into a fight, flight, or freeze mode. What looks like anger or indifference is often fear and exhaustion. So you may see your significant or your spouse um, acting a certain way or seem to be very rude or you know not able to reason. And you may think they're being rude, but sometimes it's just the fear of what could possibly happen. So the indifference, like I said, it's that fear. And sometimes people are tired. I've been going through this, I'm tired. And then we have power struggle. War can come as a result of power struggle. When one partner dominates, one spouse begin to feel they have no say. They feel like they are insignificant. So decision making becomes a battleground because one spouse who is the dominant one is putting forth everything that is needed or wants. The other spouse, on the other hand, feels they too should have a voice, which is correct. And this sometimes causes failure in the marriage. And it's not usually because of lack of love. The partnership for survival, the partnership is no longer there. And the marriage failed because of the lack of love, because love then no longer feels safe, or that spouse may not feel safe to express love because of what is happening, that dominance, that one spouse that wants to control when you go, how to go, what you should wear, who you should go with. These are not healthy traits. And it definitely will cause war in the camp because you're dealing with two separate individuals. The Bible says we become one, but in even though we become one, we still have our unique features. We still have our uniqueness about us. So both voices should be heard. Then you have in a relationship, these are the things that can cause war in the camp. A betrayal of trust, emotional, physical, financial, spiritual, all of these trust violation creates relationship trauma. And we've spoken about these topics individually throughout our time on the station. But if you have constant, repeated trust violation or betrayal, that will definitely be war. Trust violation, it then creates relational trauma. And the relational trauma then becomes infidelity, chronic lying. You ever had a spouse that lies for no reason? Financial secrecy. You will never know what his or her salary is. It's always a big secret. Doesn't share those things. Then there's spiritual manipulation. You know, I am the man of the house, or I am the woman, I'm the one that is saved. And we use these things, right? Without intentional repair. Betrayal hardens resentment. Without intentional repair, betrayal hardens resentment into resentment. So unless you intentionally decide, okay, I'm going to be true to my spouse, I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to hide my finances. In other words, you come to the table, everything should be transparent. Other than that, you are violating trust. And this will create relational trauma. Have you seen in relationship that, you know, there's always a problem of infidelity? And then you can link that back to betrayal of trust. So, what do? You try to fix that problem. Another area that we can look at is poor conflict skills and spiritual misalignment. What is this? Many couples were never taught how to fight fairly, repair after conflict. You know, sometimes there is a conflict in the relationship, and for some reason, we just don't know how now to bring it together after you would have dealt with a fight or had a misunderstanding, a conflict, or how to come together and pray honestly together or grow at the same pace spiritually. You're not trying to outdo one another, but you're growing together. And that helps a lot. Immaturity and conflict leads to escalation instead of resolution. I want to say that again. Immaturity in conflict leads to escalation instead of resolution. So, in other words, we have to be mature enough to know that if there is a conflict, we resolve it together. You are not trying to prove who is right or wrong, but you're trying to find the best resolution. But if there is immaturity in that relationship, you can try all you wish because it's going to continue to escalate instead of resolve. Because one party is trying to prove, I know I'm right, the other one is saying, I'm right. Tell me how you're going to bring a resolution in that situation. It can't. So, why saving the marriage drops off the agenda when war persists? You understand? The least or the last thing you want to do when you are in a war is to save something. You usually people are running to help themselves. They're trying to get out of this marriage and they think, and let me get out of this before this person kills me or I kill them, right? So we're going to look at that because we often think about self-preservation. It overrides the commitment. We want out. We want to save our hide before, something happens. So hope feels then in such a situation unrealistic. So love becomes associated with pain. At this point, asking why won't they try, it then misses the truth because people don't fight for relationship they no longer feel safe in. If that relationship is causing them pain after pain and there seems to be no way out, it's always a fight. You're not going to fight for that relationship. So how can you save a marriage when you are in a war, in the war camp? Recommendation then means that there has to be drastic action for extreme condition. You hear what I say? Drastic actions for extreme condition. War requires intervention. There has to be intervention. So, we can't just say we're going to come out of this war, but there has to be some form of intervention. The first thing we need to do is stop fighting to save the marriage. Forget about saving the marriage before healing. So there must be a ceasefire. There must be a pause, destructive conversation. So you try now to you try now to bring some resolution into the situation. So you must create physical and emotional space if that is needed. Sometimes you see persons, they can't stay together. They can't bring a resolution. There is war in the camp. So what they do, those persons then, they either someone go one way, the other go the next. And I would call that more or less a cooling off period. Let them be. Because as long as you in that camp with the war going on, and you don't have that little space in there, there will not be any form of resolution. Because we tend to want each person sometimes wants to know that I'm right. I know I'm right. And the other spouse on the other end is saying, I know I'm right. What she's doing is wrong. And it's a constant fight. So then you have to create that space. Create that space. And then after you would have created a space, then you have to establish boundaries against verbal, emotional, or spiritual abuse. Because you can establish a space, but every time you see him, every time you see her, there's something negative. There's something happened. You have to say something. And you don't feel good unless you have a say. You understand? So healing has to then start with each of you. But put the space in between, establish boundaries, right? Then peace comes before progress. It has to be some form of peace. So what you have to do then, seeking external or skilled intervention, find a counselor, find someone that can really help you in your situation. So this level of conflict cannot be fixed privately. It cannot. You need some licensed marriage therapist or some trauma informed counselor. You need a pastoral counselor working alongside a therapy and outside perspective disrupt these cycles. So you need to have someone to intervene. And it doesn't fix overnight. Remember now, it didn't happen overnight. So it can't be fixed overnight. It has to come over a period of time. It has to take some intentional effort on each party's behalf, right? So you have to find that extra help, okay? So outside perspective can also disrupt the toxic cycles, meaning that individual healing or before marital healing. Those are the things that sometimes the marriage can't heal until these persons are themselves healed. So if they are not healed, if the individuals are not healed, what do you think happens? That problem, that war in the camp will persist. There has to heal, right? Trauma therapy. So these are the things that can help you. So the individual can receive therapy, or they can get the grief work, accountability, and self reflection. So there has to be that intervention, that divine intervention, because believe it or not, there are many persons that are going through situations, suffering through situations, and some of them feels most of the time, I don't need anyone. I don't need a counselor. I know what my problem is. I don't need anyone to help me. You cannot be helped if you are not willing to be helped. Because oftentimes you don't see your own problem. The thing is, You do not see your problem. Others can see better than you can what is happening with you. So we have to be willing enough to say, let me hear from someone else. Let them tell me what I cannot see. And then you can get some form of help. You have to have that because you cannot build unity with two bleeding people. You're hurting, she's hurting, both of you bleeding, both of you have a situation. So what you need to do then is rebuild emotional safety first. Stop the bleeding. Romance is not at this point. You have to be able to find how to stop the bleeding. Um, so for couples, you may say, well, let's go on a date. Let's do something together. Let's find out what how we can fix this. And we tend to try to put romance, but look here, the romance and all of that is good in its place. But right now, you are in a war. And people in a war tend to get injured. There are sometimes um, the bleeding, as I say, take place. You get injured. So you have to stop the bleed. So, you know, they are some of the things. But let me tell you, you're listening to the Relationship and Marriage Hour. And if you're out there, I want you to send us your questions, send us what's your thought, how you think you can stop the bleeding. Or you can join us, follow us on TikTok, Facebook, IG, Twitch, Rumble, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Follow us. But if you have a question, if you have a point that you wish to make at this time, I want you to just send in your question. Let's have a conversation together. Let's talk together. So join us in this conversation in the chat. You can ask questions. You can give me your comments. If you are in a war camp and you are bleeding and you're trying now to, to help yourself, to help your significant other, come on, call me. Let me know some of the things you feel that you can do in order to stop the bleed, to begin to cause your relationship to heal. Okay? So we have to stop the bleed in order for us to rebuild emotional safety. So all the romance, until that bleeding is stopped, until you would have gotten help from your therapist, whichever one you would go to, until then, leave the romance on the side until we can get this thing sorted out, right? So you can't worry about the date nights at this stage, but focus on listening without defense. How quickly we try to defend ourselves. Somebody say, your spouse is telling you, well, you are this, and you're going to find, I have a little grandson, and I usually take the opportunity when we're driving together. I'm dropping him to school in the morning, and I would talk to him. And every time I say to him, you know, you have to speak loudly because he's talking to his dad, but he's talking very soft. And I say, you have to speak loud. And he always like, well, I'm talking loud. I'm doing this. You always think I'm not doing, but he's very soft, right? So for him, he find excuses. He would tell me, well, I'm talking. I say, listen to me. If someone give you an advice, if somebody tell you something, listen to them and you can learn some things. But he always feels that he knows how to say it, he knows how to do it. So we have to listen without trying to defend ourselves, trying to find a reason. Oh, I did that because this happened. Stop finding defense. Listen without trying to defend, right? Validating pain without minimizing, learning each other's triggers and needs. So that is what you need to do. Listen, validate pain without trying to minimize. If he's hurting, she's hurting because of whatever, don't try to minimize it to say, well, we have to learn each other. let us listen and let us try to understand what that person is feeling, right? So these are the things. You're bleeding in the camp. There's war in the camp. There's a marriage to be saved, right? So here's another thing. Safety restores connection, right? Safety restores connection. Redefine what is your marriage covenant. Redefine it. Couples must ask, who are we now? What behavior are no longer acceptable in this relationship? What kind of marriage are we rebuilding? It's healthy. It's good to just sit down and to find out where you are. Begin to, look at all of these things. What you used to get away with a couple of years ago doesn't work now, will not work this time. So you need to find out, if you remain in one state all your life, no changes, how boring can that be, right? So the change growth comes with change. And sometimes changes are not pleasant. When we were growing up, we often there were times when we felt this pain in our knees. I don't know if you would have feel it was felt it or passed through it, but when we felt this pain, the thing our parents would tell us, "Oh, that's growing pain. You're growing. You're becoming a big person," right? So there are the pain for growth. It happens. Any change that's going to take place, it's an uncomfortable situation, right? So, what kind of marriage are you rebuilding? And this is often a rebirth, not a repair. You're not trying to repair anything, you're trying now to rebirth. And he says, according to the word of God, it says, "Behold, I make all things new." There's some things have to change, right? Some things must change. And we do not like change. Sad to say, we are creatures of habit. If it ain't happening this way, this is the way we know it, we have a problem, right? So we have to begin to sit down and determine where we want to go, how we going to deal with this. What does it look like for us to now move on that side? This side is not working. How can we move together? How can we build a better relationship that each of us, it's a win-win. It's a win-win situation. So, everyone is happy that what took place. We need to find that sweet spot in the relationship. But it comes through, you know, changes, it comes through intentionality. We can't just hope it happens. We have to make it happen. Another thing that we must do is implement a practical framework, right? And then there are different phases of the framework that you may want to do. You may want to talk about stabilization, whereby you establish boundaries to reduce harm or create emotional breathing room. Sometimes if that person feels overwhelmed, feels that they are being suffocated, that can create problems. Then exploration, identify root causes, individual and joint therapy, truth telling without blame. Let's intentionally cut the blame game, intentionally cut the things that will create another problem. Then there's the restoration. Learn new communication skills. On Facebook, there are so many things, AI and all of these. Look here, there are so many things coming after you. So many things coming after you, right? So there is no excuses for being able to learn new communication skills. Maybe if before, but there is absolutely nothing that you need that is not out there. So what you want to do, to restore, learn new communication skills. So you want to practice repair after conflict, rebuild trust through consistency, right? So you don't just want to just you know remain the same way. I think change has to be a part of the change that you want to see. Okay. So if you're listening, please send me a comment or question. Let's talk about this thing because so many of our relationships are going down the tube, going down the drain because sometimes people feel there's no hope, there's no way out. And rather than try another way, some people are just throwing it all in. And they feel if we do that, we can start somewhere else again. But if we don't resolve what's here now, you're going to go back into another relationship carrying the same baggage, being in the same war camp. We don't want that. Let's try fix the situation in order to save the marriage. Yes, the marriage can be saved. It can be saved, and but it's just that it has to be intentional. Let's look at renewal, shared vision and values, or spiritual reconnection, ongoing maintenance, and accountability. So we are not being individual with everything we do. We're now beginning to come together, do things together, share our vision, share our values, and spiritually reconnect in order to begin to rebuild that relationship. And it has to be an ongoing maintenance and accountability. Has to be, right? Closing arguments. Saving a marriage during war is not about endurance. It is about transformation because I guarantee you, when you would have gone through a war in marriage, there are some things that you learn that you didn't know before. And now you are becoming better from the things you learn. You can't go into something and come out the same. Mm-mm. There has to be some form of transformation take place, right? So it can't be endurance. It has to be all about transformation. So some marriages don't survive. Some don't survive because couple fail, but because they refuse the depth of the healing. It takes a lot. It takes intentionality. It takes a lot, right? And it can be saved when both partners are willing to face the truth, to seek help, lay down their old weapons. Listen, we have some weapons in the relationship. We have some weapons that we use, right? Even in the war torn marriages, there can be resurrection. There can be a change. There can be a coming together, right? So when both of you have reached that point, it seems as though you're at that point where there's a no coming back. Are you willing to face the truth? Are you willing to seek the help? Are you willing to lay down the weapon? Do you realize that we keep things against each other? Sometimes we know a situation about our spouse and we keep that thing and we use it as a weapon. We use it as a weapon against our spouse. And anytime you try to rebuild, for some reason, that thing keep coming back, or we bring it back in. But let's okay, let's lay those things on the side. Let's put them on the side for the time being. You're trying now to come out of this war. You're trying to come out of this war camp, right? So you know then you have to do some things. Uh, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to wait to see everything fall apart before you do something? You know, I would rather say that when it seems difficult and when you would have reached your max, there's nothing wrong with seeking help from someone outside. You know, when you do that, when you do that, you're saying, I'm willing enough to learn the things that I don't know. All marriages do not have to end, do not have to fail because there's war in the camp. If you are humble enough, you know, we always hear our parents say, a humble child takes the grace of God. And you wonder how. But when you're humble enough, you're going through a situation, if you're humble enough to accept the fact that, look, I know I'm failing here, I know I need some help here. And if you seek that help, then what you can do, the Lord will help you with, right? And I think that is where the grace of God comes in because you're being humble enough. And you know, when we say humble, people feel that you say, oh, you should put up with this, you should let them mistreat you. That has nothing to do with it. It's just being able to sit, talk, understand each other, to learn from each other as two human beings. You can sit, you can learn, and you can help each other. And if we can only get to that point and stop being immature, you realize immaturity kills a lot of relationship. Immaturity, outside interference, and the bigger part. What about in the case of mental issues, right? You are dealing with a spouse that has a mental issue. See, all of these things can be war in the camp. But what are your plans? How would you plan to deal with it? And that is why I believe when you stand before the priest or your pastor in a relationship before you get married, there is a statement that we always use, for better or for worse. But I know when we say I know when we say for the worse, we're not thinking that kind of worse. It can't be that kind of worse. We feel that it's worse in the sense that maybe some little minor. But I can tell you, there are some things that are not minor. It's not minor. When it becomes chronic, as I've said initially, those chronic betrayals and stuff, that's not minor. Because every time you go through that, you awaken something again. You awaken a hurt that is there, right? So you have to understand that when it becomes chronic, and we stood before the witnesses, all of our family, on that happy and joyous day, and we say, for better or for worse. Sometimes I wonder if we just not repeating the words, for better or for worse. Because usually when the worst comes, no one wants it. And we just want out. I've had enough of this. I want out of this marriage. I can't take this. I can't take this. But you said, for better, for worse. And I believe that is why some people at this point now, they are creating their own vows. You know, they're creating their own vows because they don't want to be locked down to some things. But even though you may be in the camp, war camp, you can save the marriage. But first of all, you have to find out what is your war that is going on. What is your war that you are faced with? And how do you plan to sit with your spouse when you are at a point where you cannot do it? When you reach that point that you do not understand how to do it, then you need to get the professionals, the experts that are skilled in situations that similar to what you may be going through. And we've said some of these things, it's not by your fault, you know. You're in a relationship and you're enduring these things simply because your spouse may have been went through all of that trauma in his youth or her young days. They would have gone through a period of trauma. And because of that trauma, they are now trying to help themselves. But you cannot help unless you get the professional help or your pastors involved. This is no joke. It's no joke. There can be problems that are beyond our imagination. And the thing that we often see and often do when there is pain, what do we want? We want that pain to go away. And sometimes it doesn't matter, just take the pain away. So imagine you're in a relationship that is bleeding. All you want is stop the blood. If it means then that we have to break out of this relationship, you want it stopped. And that's what we, as human beings, we find the easy way out. How can I stop this pain? How can I stop the hurt? And then we come out of that relationship. So imagine you don't wait to try bring healing or save that marriage while there is a war going on. You come out of that. You come out of that. And sometimes some people will tell you there is no more for me. You can find any number of persons. They will tell you marriage is not for me. I'm not going back into marriage. I'm done with marriage. Marriage doesn't work. And they will tell you that, right? Why? Because they came out and they have not dealt with the pain. They've came out of the relationship that was causing the pain, but now they have to deal with the result of what caused the pain. They have to deal with all of that. And usually that is the part that we do not deal with. We come out of it, pain stop, we feel better now. We feel that we can live, we don't need no one else, we can move on with our life, enjoy our life. Right? Does that drive away the grief, the trauma that is there? Mm-mm. It stays right there. You can wait for 10 years, 10 years for that relationship. You know, you come out of it 10 years, you're not bothering with any relationship. And the minute you go back into another relationship, you can face the same thing that you faced in the past. So it simply means we have to deal with the issues at hand, deal with them. And I tell you, there are so many persons out there that are dealing with trauma of almost any kind. We're dealing with trauma. But as we often, very seldom would you find a person say, I'm going to get help because I'm dealing with this trauma. You have your loved one pass away, and the pain, the hurt, we do not deal with that trauma. You've had a divorce, a nasty divorce. You didn't deal with the trauma. And like I say, it stays there. And until you deal with the trauma, that stays there and it can trigger at almost any time. So being in a war, being in the war camp, let's find where the fight is coming from. Where is your fight coming from? How can you deal with that fight? Who can you talk to? When you can't see eye to eye with your spouse, when you can't sit and talk to your spouse, then what should you do? Quit, throw in the towel, forget about the marriage, and especially if there are children in the marriage, what do you do? Do you feel that they're gonna make it? Let me tell you, there are so many people because the pain is bad. You know what? When children are involved, Not only are you being hurt, I can tell you, you're damaging the children as well. So, whatever the voice in your camp, do not be selfish. Those children that come out of divorce relationship should be given some trauma intervention or grief because you've disrupted their life. You know, sometimes even you take your child and you're moving from one area, moving to the next. For example, if you are traveling, you have a job that travels, and one year you in this country, the next you in the next, another country. All of these can cause trauma in the child's life. So imagine when mom goes one way and dad goes another way. You can imagine what happens to that child. And sometimes we look at the children, we say, oh, this child is so good. The poor child is trying to adapt, trying to find its way in the midst of the pain. So imagine the child. So it can be so easy to say, okay, let's throw in the towel and start a relationship somewhere else. Now, mind you, give or take, there may be a situation that you genuinely have to end the marriage. And I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the ones that you can save the marriage despite war in the camp. And I want you, if you're listening, I want you to join in on this conversation. I want you to join in and maybe help someone. Let's help someone that may be going through what you would have experienced, how you would have been able to save your marriage in the midst of chaos, war, when any number of persons may have just said, let them go, let me go. Didn't got time for this. I want out. That's the best thing for me to do, to have my peace of mind, to save my sanity. You ever heard anyone say it? So you can save your sanity. You can, like I say, you can establish some boundaries. You can just, you know, give yourself some space in between and establish the boundaries. You can do it. And if it's only for that cooling off to get things together so you can begin to talk. You know, I've seen people, they can't live together, but they can't live without each other. Have you ever seen such a situation, right? They can't live together, but they can't live without each other. And it's because they really care. But like I say, trauma will bring out the worst and the best of us. So we must be able to deal with the trauma, deal with the pain that is going on. And if it means you have to just pull away, give yourself some space until you resolve it, until you can deal with the situation. So, and while you're doing that, you're not trying to, anymore to save the marriage. You're trying to bring a resolution in there. Once that resolution is reached, then you can save the marriage. And what a beautiful thing that could be. You've gone through hell, you've gone through all the pain, and guess what? You then become one that can help anyone who are going through what you may have passed through. Sometimes we do not have the patience to make it work. And I say, some people don't want to go through it. They will tell you off the top, I don't want to do it. I don't want to go through it. But I always feel, and I will always be an advocate for the children. I've seen it happen. I've seen it in the lives of a couple. There was war in the camp, war in the camp, and one of the things I said to the individual at the time, I said, listen, I don't see you divorce being the solution for you. I don't see that, right? But they went ahead. And who suffered? I look at the child that was in that relationship at the time. And I said, Lord, I just pray this child is not affected. Because he was such a sweet child, right? But later on in life, that child became greatly affected by that situation to this day. So when you go through relationship problems, when you go through things like that, don't be selfish. Think about your children. Think about your children. Think about your child that is in the relationship. They stand to suffer more than you do. We want healthy children. We want children that can be productive citizens in the years ahead. You spending money trying to make them the best. But when the relationship doesn't work and you really want to throw in the towel and you just, without trying, that is, and you feel you have to give it up, you can't take it. Think about that child and the damage that we do. So the marriage can be saved in a situation where it's war, but it's going to take you having to be intentional of what you do. Um, and sometimes after you would have done that, it sometimes appear that you almost can go back into the same thing again, right? There is like a repeat. But I tell you, you have to be in, if you have to go back to counseling, deal with it. But if there is no improvement, and I never tell people to end relationships, but you look into the situation and you can see whether it's worth trying. I always believe if you try, it's worth it. Try, right? Um, some of you may be listening, you probably have a situation in relationship and it feels like it's a hopeless situation, it's a no-win situation. And one of the things I encourage people to do is pray about it. And that's why it's so important. It is so important, people. Before you go into a relationship, you make sure. I always check the person. We have to now do background check. we have to do background check on these people. And one of the things for me, let me tell you what I did. When I first met my husband, I started questioning him about his parents. I checked their background. Now, I didn't have no knowledge, I didn't have no expertise in that, but I just figured if their relationship, their family relationship is a certain way, that would tell me a whole lot about the type of person they were. So my first thing, where's your mom? Where's your dad? Are they together? Before you jump into relationship, it's worth checking out the background. Never jump into a relationship without checking it out because you don't know what type of background they're coming from. And I can give you stories from other person's lives, but do your background check. Check the type of individual you know, and that it really helps in a relationship. Find out what this person wants, what they are looking for. These are things we do not do. We go off on love. We go off on looks. We go off on what that person, how that person look and what they say and whatnot. But let's find out more about them. What does he want? What is his expectation for marriage? What does she want? Does she want children? What type of relationship is he interested in? Right? Find out all these things. Listen, I can't tell you enough. Find out the other person's intentions. Find out what their vision. Find out what they want in marriage. Why they want to get married. Just sit and have a conversation. And let me tell you, if there are some things that is not what you are expecting, listen, before you go on and continue in that relationship, you need to really determine Do I want to go through this? I tell you, if a lot of us had sat down and think about these things before, we would not have gotten married to some of the people that we got married to, had we known. But we went off love. I love her, I love him. Sometimes it works, but we've seen some relationship, it didn't work. So let's know what we want. Make your list of what you want. How much you want to be, in this thing. If you're going in it not to come out of it, but you're going into this relationship because we're going to make it work. That's one of the things I did. That's one of the things I did. So as we prepare to close our show for the afternoon, we want to thank you for watching the Marriage and Relationship Hour. And we want you to please subscribe, comment, and share. And also, you can visit our website, YouTube, Facebook for our past shows. But join us on radio 24/7, and we would be happy to have you. For our next show next week, we have a very awesome show lineup for the next week. This is the month of love, y'all. This is the month of love. So we have some good things in store for you for this month of February. So we want you to join us and come with a question or two. And let's do this together. We know we can have some good relationship, and we're going to see how we can help you to make it work. So as we prepare to close, my final word to you is this. Yes, you want to save the marriage despite war in the camp, but you have to get professional outside help. Because if that relationship is bleeding, you need more than your usual um, attempt to make it work. Get help from the outside, and I'm sure you would be able to resurrect that relationship that you feel that there's no more hope. So until next time, until next week, like I always say, we are not out of content, but we are certainly out of time. And we want you to join us next week as we continue our program with our um, special guest that will be on for next week. Come and join us. And we look forward to having you. And I want to say, in the war camp, save your marriage. And I guarantee you, it will be a good thing thereafter. So until next time, I want to say bye, bye, and we'll see you next week.